The Arena Football Hall of Fame has returned, and we want you to become a part of the family. Introducing the Arena Football Hall of Fame Patreon. Whether an All-Star or a Hall of Famer, our reasonably priced tiers each have their own exclusive perks. Early access to the AFL Rewind podcast, honorary selection committee member, and much more. Help us build a Hall of Fame we'll all be proud of. Head to patreon.com/AF Hall of Fame to join. Welcome to AFL Rewind, a look back at all things arena football, sponsored by Phenom Elite. I'm your host, Tim Capper. Throughout this historical series of podcasts, we've been able to revisit how many of the teams that we loved got their beginnings in league history. You know, whether it had been the Albany Firebirds, or whether it was really the second coming, I guess, but it was from the Pittsburgh Gladiators to the Tampa Bay Storm, so how the Tampa Bay Storm got their start. Well, this episode, we are going to be speaking with a gentleman who had a very integral part in starting up a team that became one of the two teams in what many call, in Arena Football League history, the best rivalry that the league ever had. This episode, we're going to be speaking with Eric Lyons. He was one of the managing partners for the Orlando Predators. And our conversation with him will encompass everything from the name Predators itself, when it came to their black and red color scheme, to many of the interesting aspects of the team itself, and what it was like to be an owner of a team in the Arena Football League. Plus, we'll also be reminiscing about his time with other teams in the AFL. So without further ado, let's speak with Eric Lyons. Well, on this episode, it's a little bit different than what we've had before in the past, but just by looking at this gentleman's resume, I think we're going to have some great stories from him coming up. With us this episode is Eric Lyons. He is a gentleman who, if you were a Predators fan, you knew who this guy was, but he was just a lot more than being part of the Orlando Predators organization, but we'll get into that. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Tim.
Well, as I think people will remember you specifically if they only seen your name or did a search for your name within Arena Football. They'll notice that you were the 1992 Executive of the Year. We'll be getting to that. But let's start off at the very beginning, back in 91. I mean, you weren't necessarily just the Predators Director of Operations that year. You had quite a few hats, but what I wanted to ask you about specifically, because I know you're a minority investor, are you able to tell us the story of how the Predators actually came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And it kind of pretty much originated with a guy named Mike McBath. Mike played at Penn State and with the Buffalo Bills, and he originally got to Orlando in the 70s with the World Football League. Mm-hmm. He played for Jack Pardee and the Florida Blazers, and he settled in Orlando and became a stockbroker. And when Arena Football started up, he started following it, just being a football guy. And he was a stockbroker at Payne Weber, and his boss at Payne Weber was a fellow named Tracy Allen. Tracy was in charge of the entire state of Florida for Payne Weber until Tracy retired about 89. And so when Mike really got the itch, he kind of followed it for the first couple of years, and of course the league imploded or exploded, however you want to characterize it. And then they reached out to the league, or Mike did, in I guess midway through 1990 or so, mm-hmm. and started talking with Foster, and he got Tracy involved. But neither of those guys were they had done well in their careers, but they weren't super big money guys. So they needed to put a little group of investors together. And one of Tracy was one of the top amateur golfers in Florida for many years. And so golf was his passion. And one of his big golfing buddies was Davey Johnson, the former Mets manager. And I mean, Davey had gotten fired from the Mets in, early in the 1990 season. And Davey was kind of an interesting thing. At that time, prices of Major League Baseball teams were still low enough that you could become an investor for not a whole lot of money. So Davey had he thought that maybe it would help him get a new job in Major League Baseball if he could invest some money in a team. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, he also had a real estate project that he was doing in north central Florida that he took public at the time, and he reserved a portion of the public offering for an investment in a professional sports franchise.
Right.
So it just so happened that when Tracy approached him with the idea of arena football, he had this money fresh in his pocket from the public offering and set aside. And so Davey said, yeah, let's do it. And so Davey was the original majority investor.
Okay.
And then there was a group of several other people. Basically, there were different shares to the team that were broken up. Like there was one guy who was a former U.S. congressman who was in one of the major law firms in town, and he was a friend of Tracy's. So he said, yeah, I'll put in X dollars. And then he split that amount up amongst like 9 other attorneys in his law firm. So, there were actually probably 25 total people involved that had, anywhere from, say, $5,000 to a couple $100,000 invested.
Right. And how are you involved too? Because I know you were, as being a minority investor, what was told to you in order to bring you into the fold also?
Well, I was actually my wife at the time had been longtime friends with Tracy's wife, and so we were social friends with them. And actually, I was playing golf with Tracy on the day when Davey drove up in his golf cart and said, I got the money together, let's do it. And so that piqued my interest. So after Davey drove off, I asked Tracy, do what? And he told me, and I said, I want in.
Oh, okay.
My background was in real estate development and construction, both from the operations side and marketing side at that point. But I had from side investments and things, I had been involved in some concert promotion and some things like that. So kind of the, event promotion business was already in my blood. So this just kind of fit in.
Not being a part of ownership of a football team before, or any sports team before, did you have any questions? Were you able to do your due diligence, or did you go based off of what Davey was able to tell you about the league itself and, Commissioner Foster, et cetera?
No, it was throwaway money.
Okay.
It's fun money. I mean, when you get involved in something like that, I always, later on when I was involved in selling franchises, the analogy I would always make to people was that it's like rental property.
Okay.
Whatever money, if you can make money year over year while you own and operate it, that's great, but it's never going to be enough to change your personal lifestyle. Mm-hmm. What you hope is that the value of the asset you hope the expenses the income will cover the expenses as the value of the asset grows over time, and then maybe someday when you sell it, you can make a little money.
Right.
But the sports and entertainment business, I mean, it's as much fun as it is a business.
Okay. When it came to you being a minority owner, did you have any say on what the identity was going to be? It finally was the Predators, obviously, and everybody knew them for their black and red uniforms throughout their history. Did you have any insight into any input into the identity itself, or was it just something that the majority owners were going to decide on?
Well, no, actually, I mean, everybody kind of had some input. Basically, Davy Johnson's oldest daughter was working for an advertising agency in Orlando. Mm-hmm. So they hired that advertising agency, and it was a company called Jackson Design, and the principal, Scott Jackson, was a very talented guy. And, he came up with a list of, 50, 60 potential names.
Wow.
And, Predators ended up getting picked, but Scott did the logo, Scott did the colors, as far as all the original marketing stuff, giving credit where credit is due, that all goes on Scott Jackson's shoulders.
And it's iconic to this day. I remember, it's funny, I remember actually one year for Halloween doing the Predator scratch logo on my pumpkin. So it made an impression on me. Yeah. That's the thing. And I think that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, and then from the kind of the entertainment and presentation side, again, just pure serendipity. At the time, there was a guy living in Orlando by the name of Mark Grega. Mm-hmm. And Mark is, to this day, he's one of the top laser and pyro guys doing rock concerts around the world.
Okay.
And he was living in Orlando at the time. I think his wife was from Orlando, and he was taking a break after finishing the 1989 Pink Floyd World Tour. And so, this is the cream of the crop of, arena event presentation. And he wandered in the office one day and, came up with all these suggestions for, lasers and pyro. And he's the one who came up with the Welcome to the Jungle as the theme song and everything. So again, giving credit where credit is due. It's Mark Grega, and he's now in Chicago and has a company called Strictly FX, and he's still out there doing David Gilmour, Roger Waters, Ariana Grande. He's doing the top tours around the world.
Wow. So it's funny. So not only do the names that we coaches and players start off earlier, but obviously now we have more tie-ins. Sort of like, was it 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever it is?
Yeah. It's really interesting. All the like you got into a little bit with Ricky Foggy, all the cross pollination with other leagues like the CFL, and mm-hmm. Just the roots of the Arena Football League are just so deep in whether it's the World League, the USFL, the CFL, other leagues that have come and gone. The Continental League, mm-hmm. Which brought Perry Moss to Orlando originally in the late 60s, as well as, some names you may know from the CFL like Don Jonas.
Yeah.
Brett Muncie's father, Tom Muncie, was a wide receiver on the Orlando Panthers, which won the Continental League when Perry was head coach. And, he and a bunch of the other guys from that team settled in Orlando and became high school coaches and raised their families and, stayed in touch. Tommy Bland, who was a great wide receiver on the Continental the Continental League Orlando Panthers, he was the wide receivers coach of the Predators the first year in '91. So just all this interconnected stuff is fascinating.
For sure. And also you're talking about, not only people or players that come from other locations. If you like Barry Wagner also, if Barry had not, if the Spring Professional Football League hadn't failed, he may have not come to the Predators.
Yeah, well, I mean, similar. I mean, I think you may have heard the story, on a broadcast or something about how. We were just, during that first off season between '91 and '92. Mm-hmm. Most days it was just Perry and I in the office, along with had our ticket manager Edie and Bob Flynn, who's now with the National Predators, who was an intern with us at the time. And when one of the training camps for the PSFL was up in DeLand, which is 40 minutes north of Orlando. And when that failed and all these guys got locked out and stranded and everything, a whole flood of people showed up in our offices. And who was the guy? There was a lineman that had played with Perry in Chicago or Detroit, Quentin Knight.
Okay. And
he was with one of the teams, and he came into the office, and Perry ended up signing him for '92. But a guy that was with him that Quentin was trying to get Perry to sign that Perry didn't was a fellow by the name of Darren Arbette.
There we go.
And then, of course, we had a similar story with Carl Lakins, who had played for Perry in Chicago, I think, and he was in the PSFL, and he came in, and he didn't have Barry Wagner with him, but he had Barry Wagner's highlight tape.
Okay.
And I can remember sitting around with Perry, and I think Les was there, and I mean, it was just, it was just jaw-dropping. I was like, we got to get this guy.
Yeah, for sure. Are you able to blow a couple of minds here and tell us what possible other names the Predators might have been? Because we heard the stories about what the Albany Firebirds could have been, and what possibly, what was reported. I think that Tampa Bay originally may have been called the Predators or something like that. But I mean, but it wasn't able to be confirmed. But any names that you remember that the Predators might have been?
Not off the top of my head. Again, there's a list of probably 50, 60 possibilities, and we're going back almost. I hate to say how many years, but a lot of the things. Obviously, Predators came out of the movie industry. I'm sure, like Terminators was on the list. Yeah. I mean, just a whole bunch of stuff, and of course, a lot of things got eliminated because. Possible trademark issues, and But I mean, I don't remember anything else being a close contender. I mean, it was pretty much always Predators. Yeah. And again, credit Scott with the idea of it was like, okay, the logo with the talons scratching through the back of the name was always meant to be kind of mysterious. What would a predator be? A predator probably lives in a jungle, and a predator is probably, some kind of cat or some kind of bird. But, so it was always a mystery what the predator was until, we had a mascot idea presented to us in similar fashion to how the Welcome to the Jungle and the Pyro and all that stuff was. Just someone popped in the office with a suggestion, and a bunch of us sitting around just looked at each other and said, yeah, that's cool, let's do it.
Yep. And to this day, if anybody knows Predators history, it's Claw, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was not originally.
Okay.
I'll say I won't use the last name, but Alan, the guy who was
Duckworth.
Yeah, Alan Duckworth, who was Claw during most of the time. He was actually the second one, the original design and everything. One of the other people involved in in the Predators in the '91 season was a guy named Billy McGee, who Billy might also be an interesting conversation for you at some point because he's been several places, Tampa, Nashville, and so forth. But Billy was had also been in the event promotion business, and it was like he had these two ladies that worked for him. He managed some tennis facilities. He was a former touring tennis pro, and so he managed some tennis facilities. And he had these two twin sisters that worked for him, and the brother of one of the sisters is the one who came up with the whole the original Predator costume, and he was involved in some kind of para-rescue group that did rappelling and high altitude rescue type stuff. So he came up with he was the first one that came up with the concept. Wouldn't it be cool to rappel out of the rafters during the opening? So I said, okay, go for it.
Oh, I can only imagine. That's something I may have to go searching through newspapers.com to see if I can find when he was first introduced. So, was it all, you mentioned him before and you're talking very highly of him. Was it always going to be Perry Moss as the head coach?
Yeah, I think, there was, he was well known in the area. Obviously he'd been the coach of the Panthers in the Continental League. And then, there was part of our ownership group had also been involved in the Renegades in the World League, or the USFL rather. Mm-hmm. And Perry had basically rescued that team. And so he was very well thought of. And he had a long-time Florida connection going back to when he'd been head coach and athletic director at Florida State back in the late 50s or early 60s. And he had some Orlando residential connections. And Les, his son, had just finished up at UCF. So, they were right there in Central Florida anyway. And when Tim Markham, after his one-year hiatus with Steve Spurrier, decided to return to the Detroit Drive, that made Perry available. And, the two top guys that you wanted coaching your team in the Arena League at the time were Tim Markham and Perry Moss. Exactly.
Considering, people need to remember, too, that Moss started at the very beginning back in '87. He was the head coach for the Chicago Bruisers. So,
yep.
As your resume shows, I mentioned to everybody that you did have a lot of hats, even that first year itself. Marketing manager after the first game itself, director of operations after the season itself, director of media relations, and also director of operations. For you, what was the toughest part about getting this team up and running? What were the obviously brand new team? You yourself had never been in a place where you had a startup of a new sports team, but what were the biggest challenges that you faced as a minority investor for the Predators that year?
Well, in 1991, the whole thing was kind of a blur. There was they had hired a fellow named Denny Petro, who had he had worked for the Gladiators in Pittsburgh the year before, and actually that team had kind of been a joint venture between Bob Grease and the Pittsburgh Civic Arena.
Okay.
So actually, Denny had actually been an employee of the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, and when Bob moved the team to Tampa, he, for whatever reason, chose not to hire Denny, and so Mike and Tracy decided to hire Denny as the director of operations the first year because he had some knowledge of the game. He at least had a year of knowing what it looked like. And actually, Perry was the only one who would, of anybody having to do with any management of the team, Perry and Denny were the only two people who'd ever seen an arena football game.
True. Okay.
I mean, I remember there was before the 91 season, there was an exhibition game in Jacksonville, and Perry and Davey and Tracy and I drove up together to see that game. And, for Davey, Tracy, and I, it was the first time we'd ever actually seen an arena football game. So, and that was a couple of weeks before we were starting up on our own. So, I mean, the whole thing was kind of a blur. And it's just we had, before the season ever started, the guy that they had originally hired to do the media relations work, he didn't work out for whatever reason. And so that was a void that I stepped into because I had a little background in marketing and public relations.
Okay.
And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the season, the guy that they had hired to do the ticket management, he didn't work out for whatever reason. So there was another void there. So, and I had some previous background and knowledge there. So I kind of stepped in there and got some people trained up to do the ticket stuff. So there weren't, it was just kind of a series of challenges that we were all kind of figuring out on the fly that first year. But the main challenges came that next off season, the 91 to 92 off season, when I got put in charge of things, and I had to figure out how to pay the bills and get us into a second season, because it was definitely in doubt whether there would be a second season.
Well, how far in the 1991 off season? At what point did you and the ownership group decide the Predators will be back for 1992?
Well, I think everybody wanted it, but basically all the money that had been invested was gone. Mm-hmm. The information that the league put out about what it cost to run a team was basically completely inaccurate.
Okay. I'm not surprised, but
yeah. And so all the money was gone, and so we had to, basically figure out how we were going to get to the second season. And I remember when we were moving our field out of the Orlando Arena at the end of the first season and loading it onto trucks to go into off-site storage, the arena manager very loudly proclaimed to everybody within earshot, "Well, they'll never be back."
Wow.
And so we definitely had a lot of challenges, but whether it was we had to renegotiate our arena deal to get something that would work for both parties. Right. We had, even back at that time, we had workers' comp was beginning to become a challenge, mm-hmm. and we had to tackle that bull by the horns. And we basically came up with the ownership decided they were going to go forward, and we came up with a game plan. And basically, our game plan centered on selling season tickets, and we just went to work and sold season tickets.
Was selling season tickets, was it fun for you? Because obviously you'd come off of any season that you get to the next season, you consider it a success. I mean, yes, you were 3-7 that first season. That's fine. It's very rare for an expansion club to do as well as the Vegas, the Vegas Knights did their first year, as an example. Yeah. But what was it like trying to sell season tickets to the masses? Because obviously arena football is something new. You have a plus that you have the team in Tampa Bay, so you're kind of fighting over the state in a way, even though you're on opposite sides of the state. But was it an easy sell to sell these season tickets to fans?
No, and we also had the challenge that in that there was another football team in town called the Orlando Thunder in the World League.
That's right.
So, they got bigger budgets and more money to spend, and they're traditional. We were atypical. And so, no, it wasn't easy at all. So we had to get creative, and we just worked the phones. I mean, we had, I think in the 91 season, we had sold about 1,600 season tickets.
Okay.
And so, when I just with Edie, our ticket manager, and Bob Flynn, the intern who was helping her, I told them, I said, we're not going to give up. We're going to start with those 1,600 people. And, you call them once and they say, no, I don't want to renew. You're going to call them at least 3 times. You're going to get 3 no's before you give up on them.
Okay.
So we just worked it hard. And then we did come up with some, some fairly creative promotions, things that, did not cut the price of tickets, but added value to them. Like we did a Christmas package where you could get 2 T-shirts and 2 caps and a gift bag and 2 end zone tickets in the upper deck, all for $49.
Okay.
Well, I mean, no one wanted to sit in the upper deck end zone, so very few people bought the $49. They said, well, how much is it to upgrade to the lower sidelines?
There we go.
But they still got their 2 T-shirts and their 2 caps and the gift bag. And I mean, again, we just worked it. It's a matter of just rolling up your sleeves and working the phones.
Now, it's interesting you say that, and I want to ask you this because, when people bring up season tickets, they bring up, packages, they bring up doing groups and stuff like that, and people are saying, that's the easiest thing to do. Well, Eric, what are you able to tell them? I mean, because it sounds like it is not easy at all trying to get these people in the door, whether it be through season tickets or through these type of packages.
Well, what always happens is, I mean, obviously the people who have the most money are the ones who can afford to spend it.
Right.
So because of that, your highest price seats always go first. Mm-hmm. That we had we had 2 rows of seats right behind the boards. We called our dream seats or something like that. And, those were like $150 a game. I mean, it was no problem to sell those because it was a unique experience.
Right.
And so, it was easy to sell the premium seats, and then it just got tougher as you get higher and further into the end zones, behind the nets and so forth. But again, it's economics 101. It's supply and demand. The more you can shrink the supply, you increase the demand, which means you can raise the prices. And so, the people over the years that made the mistakes in the leagues were the ones who discounted their ticket prices, because in the Arena League, tickets was the only money you got.
Right.
You didn't get parking, you didn't get concessions, you got a percentage of your merchandise, but that wasn't much. So tickets were your lifeblood, and if you it's like the public gets trained. No one will pay full price for a car because if you wait 30 days, there'll be some special. Yeah. Well, if you train the public that, hey, if you wait long enough, these guys are going to discount their ticket prices, then no one will pay full price. So that's why you have to do value-added promotions where it looks like you're cutting your ticket price because they're getting extra stuff, but you're really not. They're paying full price and getting extra stuff.
And you're just trying to do something where if you do these giveaways, because I've dealt with it before too as a season ticket holder, you just want to make sure you're not going to tick off your season ticket holders by these specials that you're giving away to Joe fan who's going to come in for a 3-game package or whatnot.
Exactly. And I mean, of course, we could do something in Orlando because at the time our capacity was 13.6 or something.
Mm-hmm.
We're like Bob over in Tampa, or when Billy and Mike tried to do New Orleans for a couple years in the Superdome, you just had, there was no way you could create a buying urgency among people. Or Bob's promotions where, buy one, get one free, or buy one in the lower deck, get two free in the upper deck. And so he was putting out some impressive attendance numbers, but when he would put 25,000 people in his building and I'd put 13,000 in mine, I'd have twice the revenue.
Yeah. And obviously at that time, not everybody could be Mike Ilitch, where he basically had the building and he was getting everything. He was getting everything. So he was at the advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, obviously it paid off because the Predators, sure, they lost their very first game that year, but then they ran off 9 straight in the regular season, and they were your team was something to deal with, because not only were you scoring, you were pulling off league firsts. I got to ask you, did you ever think that'd be possible that a team could not score a single point in a game, which the Predators were a part of that year where they shut out the San Antonio Force 50-0 at home?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was that opening stretch of that season was really incredible. We went over to Tampa and lost a close one. Then, the real Barry Wagner debut was in our second game when we went out to Sacramento, and Barry did a couple of things in that game where I was sitting up in the press box with our PR guy, and we just looked at each other and said, what is this? And then, then I think we played New Orleans or somebody. Then we went to Detroit, and that was the Miracle Minute game. And then, and then we came back and shut out San Antonio, or maybe it was shut out San Antonio before the Miracle Minute game. But I mean, yeah, it was. But frankly, when it happened, I mean, in that season, we had the 50-0 win against San Antonio, and then we also beat the Rattlers like 77-21 or something.
Yeah.
And it just, it was all happening so fast. When you're managing an operation like that, there's just so much going on that you really don't have time to sit back and say, wow, what did we just do? It's like you celebrate after the game. It's all the rah-rah stuff. You go have some cocktails, and the next morning you get up and you start working on the next week. You really don't have time to look back at it until the season's over.
Like Perry Moss would do to his players, or a lot of coaches now these days do, go 1-0 and then continue.
Well, or what they'd always tell them is, okay, you've got 24 hours. Enjoy this. Mm-hmm. Be careful. Take care of your teammates, and we'll see you on Sunday morning, Monday morning, or whatever, and start on the next one.
Yeah. How for you being an executive with the league and part owner? How was it for your first playoffs that year? Because you guys hosted all 3 games. You hosted the Arena Bowl also. What was it like for you, knowing that between the 91 and 92 season, how close it came that the team also almost did not come back?
Yeah. Well, it was building momentum all year. Like I say, we lost the first one, then we ran off the 11 straight. And, of course, the whole concept of playoffs, it got to be, 3 or 4 weeks before the playoffs would start. And from an operations side, it becomes everybody's sitting around looking at each other and say, all right, how do playoffs work? Right. What are we supposed to do? How do ticket sales work? How does this work? How does that work? And so, I mean, obviously it was hosting, of course, in those days, I don't know how it was in later years, but at that time, the Arena Bowl actually belonged to the league. So even though it was in our building, we didn't get any of the money from that. That all went to the league.
Okay.
Because then they paid the team shares and the game expenses and everything out of that. But the quarterfinals and semifinals, hosting those, really helped us, because we would make our budget every year based on the regular season. So having 2 additional home games was, a real shot in the arm as far as, being good for the budget. But that first ever playoff game, was like the first weekend in August in '92, was really cool, because obviously it's, at that time, like the only other team that played in the same building, the Orlando Magic, they hadn't even sniffed playoffs. And so the town was really starting to notice us. And that game began the multiple year streak of sellouts.
Right. Okay.
And then the other thing that was really cool about that game was that morning, I was in my office with Tim Hips, our PR guy, and he had used to work for the Orlando newspaper, and he got a tip from one of his buddies that Shaquille O'Neal was going to sign his contract that day. His the very first contract. He'd been drafted that summer. And so he was in town, and so we decided we wanted to try and get Shaq to come do the coin toss for the game. So Tim went over, the Magic were having a press conference in the arena, so Tim went over to that to try and catch Shaq, and I went over to the hotel across the street to try and catch his parents, and we managed to get him to agree to come to the game, let Shaq do the coin toss, and we got them all in Orlando Predators T-shirts. So as the Magic were running Shaq around town to do all the 620 sports media appearances on all the local TV stations, and he was wearing a Predators T-shirt, which was awesome, rather than a Magic T-shirt. And then when he walked out on the field to do the coin toss, it was just the loudest I've ever heard that arena. I mean, so just a lot of cool things happening. And he came out there and shook the hands of our players, and he dissed the Cleveland players, which just fired up our crowd that much more.
Now I have to try to get a copy of that game. I have to see that. That's great. That year you were also named the Executive of the Year, and as I mentioned before, the uncertainty of 91 to 92, how you guys started off the very first game of the season, but how you ended, even though you didn't come away with a title. How did it make you feel that the league gave you the first ever Executive of the Year award?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was special. It was my whole attitude was, we don't want to be minor league. We are in all reality minor league, but we don't have to act minor league. And so we did, everything we tried to do all year, we tried to do first class. And I remember we were having, we always had owners meetings at the same time as the Arena Bowl, and we had managed Detroit when they were flying in. Of course, they had the Red Wings jet, but part of our responsibility as the host team was to provide local transportation, bus pickup at the airport, take them to their hotel, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So knowing that they were coming in on the Red Wings jet, I had the mascot, our cheerleaders, our bus, and I'd managed to get 2 or 3 of the local TV stations all out at the airport to film the plane coming in and Detroit coming in. And, which is just, it's kind of a major league approach to stuff. And, it seems like small stuff, but at that point, 6 years into the Arena League, they hadn't done stuff on that scale as far as promotion and media attention and so forth. Mm-hmm. And remember, we were in the owners' meeting, and Gary Vito walked in, and he had, of course, been on the plane with the team. He was the GM of the Detroit team at the time, and he just walked in and said, just was raving about this whole experience. I can't believe what I just experienced. Never I thought I'd see it in the Arena League, and just patting me on the back and thanking me and stuff. And then, a few days later, when we were at the arena ball, the party the night before the game, when they give out all the awards, Joe had this plaque made up. And it was pretty cool. It was very rewarding.
Where do you have that currently?
It's at home in my home office.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it in a prominent location? Is it something where somebody would walk by it, ask about it, and you'd be able to tell them the story immediately?
Well, I've kind of got it with, some other stuff, I've got some things from golf, pictures of, pro-am golf tournaments I played in with touring pros and stuff. Okay. So it's kind of in a collage with that. So sure. It's kind of my sports wall.
Okay. Obviously, as you said, 91 was the beginning of a long period of time where Orlando became synonymous with being a powerhouse in the Arena Football League. I know you were the director of operations for up through 94 with the Predators. Before you left the Preds, and we'll get to that here in a couple of minutes, was it frustrating for you being an owner, being so dominant, but yet not being able to get over that hump and to win an Arena Bowl championship? Or was that something that really didn't weigh on you at all?
Well, no. Anybody who's involved in sports or involved in entrepreneurial business is a competitor. You want to win. Mm-hmm. I mean, we want, it was the people in the front office took it just as hard as the people in the locker room when we lost. Right. And I remember, we kind of thought 92 was a long shot. We were happy to be there. Obviously, we were kind of full of ourselves from going 11-1 and earning the right to host. But, Art Schleister was something else. In that 92 game, if you haven't seen it, that guy was battered, bruised, and busted, and he just getting up. He would not be defeated. Just a complete tour de force. And, then in the 94 game, I thought we had that one. It came right down to the last minute, the last 25 or 30 seconds. And I was standing in the end zone, with some of my staff, and we had the trophy on a table ready to bring out for the, end of the game TV celebration. And, Ben Bennett threw a pass, and Alex Shell went up with both hands in the end zone and had the ball in his hands like 3 feet in front of me. And a rattler paw came up and knocked it out between Alex's hands, and that was the end of the game. It was just, believe me, it's emotional, and you live it and breathe it.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, besides being Predators Director of Operations, as I said, you wore so many hats during your career in the AFL. Obviously, you're an AFL board member from 91 through 96. But you're also a part of you're also the chairman of the Expansion Committee and Relocation Committee starting in 94. But you got started earlier than that, actually. You got started off in 93. So you held the position unofficially in 93, being a part of the Expansion Committee? Because I know you were a part of the approval for the Fort Worth Cavalry, the Las Vegas Sting, and then the Milwaukee Mustangs in 93. So were you part of the group then?
Yeah, there had been a lot of upheaval I'll just use that one adjective,
Okay.
around the whole team sales process at that time. And there was a consensus developed that we needed to come up with a more organized process for both doing it, disseminating information to prevent potential owners so they were properly aware of what to expect, and that we should also do some kind of proactive vetting of people.
All right.
Because basically, up to that point, there'd been a whole bunch of sketchy people coming and going. And, the league operated teams and people coming up with bogus letters of credit and, just a bunch of weird stuff.
Oh,
and,
lovely. That's all you need is somebody who claims they have money and then they for a team and then.
Yeah, you get half. I mean, but that's been kind of a history of all sports, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know what it is that it attracts, but there's stories about in the World Football League, the USFL, none of those leagues was ever stable for a whole season. And so the Arena League was really no different. But so when at the end of the 92 season, Davy Johnson sold his controlling interest to Don Disney and Jim English.
Yes. Okay.
And Don had been the majority owner of the Renegades in the USFL. He'd been a minority partner in the World League Thunder. At the same time, he was a limited partner, minority investor in the Predators. He was an investor in the starting of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays baseball team and, a major player in thoroughbred horse racing.
Right.
So, sports was in his blood. So he took over actually that same day of that first playoff game in 1992.
Okay.
That was Don's first day as the majority owner and first game. But anyway, Don is a very impressive individual. He's in the hospital business, owns and operates hospitals. And so he understands finance. And so he got appointed by his peers as the chairman of the Expansion and Relocation Committee. And then, because I was, each team got 2 reps on the board. And so Don was, obviously, he was the main money. He was the main one. And me as the operations guy was typically the other person who would go.
Okay.
And so basically, because Don had a very big business to look after, basically I did a lot of the work of the expansion relocation for him. So we put together a whole prospectus that we presented, and then came up with a procedure where people would write a option check, and then once we'd gotten their option check and the first set of documents for them, then I along with somebody else would travel to the cities where the prospective teams were going to be and do a little due diligence, not as much on the people as on the market, to see if they had had an arena deal, if there was support in the market and that kind of thing. So but there were others involved, like when the Velazis in Milwaukee came aboard. I flew up there, and Jim Foster drove up from Chicago, and the two of us met with the Velazzi family and went to the Bradley Center and kind of went through the whole thing with them. And I think when Woody Kern came in with Fort Worth, so I don't think I went to Fort Worth. Somebody else went out there, but I had a lot of conversations with Woody's financial people, and then it was actually Mike Trigg was his head coach and GM, and Mike came to Orlando for 2.5 days or so of just, intense meetings and going through stuff. What do you know? What do you need to know?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So.
And I mean, obviously, the two of the three names that you mentioned there that you're involved in '93 are very well known to this day in the Arena Football League with Woody Kern and the Velazis.
And I mean, and Trigg. I mean, there's an Arena Football winning coach.
Oh yeah.
And I just messaged back and forth with him the other day. He's a top-notch guy.
For those who may have not known, especially because as fans, we really don't know the inner workings when it comes to expansion. I know you've gone a little bit into it here. At that time in '93, what did the league need monetarily from a group in order to be considered to be an expansion franchise for the Arena Football League? Do you remember how much they had to pay?
It was, and that was part of the problem. It was just all over the place in those years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what, kind of cost some people their credo in the league. But it's like when we bought in with Orlando, supposedly our franchise fee in 1991 was $500,000.
Okay.
And it was supposed to be paid $250 the first year, $250 the second year.
Okay.
Well, we got to the board meetings at the end of the first year, and we found out that we were the only ones who had actually paid that.
Oh boy.
The guy who had been allowed to come in Columbus, supposedly he was paying the same thing, but he hadn't paid a dime. And then it was also when I think at those same meetings we're finding out that a deal had been made with the NBA teams in Arizona and San Antonio, and they both had been offered franchises for, I think it was $125. So,
yeah.
So obviously Orlando never paid that other $250.
Yeah, no consistency. Wow.
Yeah. So I want to say, I mean, I know that in '94, when Memphis and St. Louis and Connecticut and San Jose came in, I think it was up to a legitimate 600 at that point. But it was, again, you'd pay $300 the first year, $300 the second year. And it was kind of, a little bit of a shell game because, basically, and they do that in the major league too. The major league sports too. You'll see when, if a team joins the NHL, for instance, you'll read, well, they pay $150 million and then they give up shares of other revenues for like another 3 years.
Right. And
so you would join the Arena League and you'd pay half your fee, and then your other half of the fee would be basically paid from your share of the next year's expansion fees that you would never get.
Okay.
So it was kind of, it was a little bit of a shell game. So, I mean, I'm thinking in '93, they were probably still 250, 300, something like that. And then, '94, it started to move up.
So glad to get out of that dang time travel machine.
Where'd you go?
I went back to the 80s to grab some of that good sports merch from my favorite defunct franchises. I spent my life savings on that machine.
You bought a time travel machine to buy sports merchandise?
Yeah, gladly.
You could have gone to 503 Sports, right? The website?
Yeah, no, I didn't think of that at all.
Yeah, they sell all sorts of throwback sports merch from leagues like the World Football League, XFL, UFL, and the Arena Football League, several others.
Shoot.
Yeah, they sell hats, shirts, even custom jerseys from all sorts of vintage sports teams.
Oh man, I spent like a lot of money on that time travel machine.
Well, look, listeners of AFL Rewind get 10% off their first order by using the promo code ARENAFAN at checkout. That might help you out.
Yeah, it does.
Go on over to 503-sports.com and get your merch today.
Do you know anyone who wants to buy like a overpriced time travel machine?
No, sorry, I don't.
Did you like the process of being on the expansion committee? Was it? I mean, obviously you were taking things very seriously, but considering that what had not been, as I said, you had to come up with the how much these teams are going to pay, how they're going to pay it, and to streamline the entire process. Did you ever at one point regret being asked to join or deciding to join the expansion committee, or is it just for you? It was just being a part of the AFL.
Well, I mean, it was extra work on top of running the Predators, but it was fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was off-season stuff. I'm kind of a builder creator type, so okay. I get bored with doing the same thing day after day after day. So having the opportunity to do the off-season to fly out to some city that maybe I hadn't been there before and meet a whole bunch of new people, and it's like when I went out to Las Vegas to interview the Bill McFarland group, who was the original. They had bought the first option to have the team there.
Okay.
I mean, it was such a cool experience. They were actually building the MGM Grand Hotel at the time, which had the 13,000 seat Grand Garden Arena attached to it, and the guy who was the head of the arena, the name was Dennis something. He just kind of, I had my meetings with McFarland and his owner group, and then they kind of turned me over to Dennis. It was a cool experience, and then something that not many people outside the league would ever have a reason to know, but the promoter of the fight we went to, it was Bob Arum, and the next morning after the fight, Denny picked me up at my hotel and said, I got somebody I want you to meet. And we go back over to Caesars, and we go up and walk into a suite, and here's Bob Arum and his Beverly Hills attorney both sitting around in bathrobes in their suite, Bloody Marys. And Bob Arum wants to know all about arena football. So it was kind of cool. Sat there for a couple hours, and then Bob Arum actually wrote an option check for a second position on a Las Vegas franchise in case the Farland group didn't go through. In retrospect, maybe it would have been better for the league if Arum had gotten the team, but that's not the way it worked. The other people had legitimately been first in line, put up their money, signed an option contract, and as long as they performed, it was theirs. And it would not have been right or ethical to bump them out of the way to take the bigger name guy.
That's cool. That actually really is neat. Now let me ask you, because obviously through AFL history, teams have had different chances and to have an arena league team. They've come, they've left, they've come back again. In your opinion, what was it about Las Vegas? Was it the glitz? Was it the glamour? Or at this point in time of the AFL, it was just a matter of Las Vegas had the ownership, where they felt that the league could thrive?
I don't believe that there's any market that is intrinsically bad for the sport. But every market is different. And so you have to figure out what will work. And I just think a lot of times, whether it's Las Vegas, whether it's other cities, people gave up too soon.
Okay.
And obviously their pocketbooks probably dictated that.
Yeah.
But it's like the original group in Las Vegas. If they had totally bought into all the branding and promotion that the MGM hotel, 5,000 room hotel, where you never had to leave air conditioning between that hotel and the arena. If they had totally bought into that partnership, I think they would have been a success. But somewhere during that season, the relationship went sour. I'm not sure of the details. And so they made the decision to move over to Thomas and Mack for the next season and for the 95 season.
Yeah.
And that was not a success either. I mean, what you heard the people saying was, Las Vegas people won't go to the Strip because they don't want to be around tourists.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
which you still hear today.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some validity to that. I mean, you had that in Orlando with the theme parks. Some people didn't want to go to the end of town where the theme parks were because they're worried about the traffic.
No, that's true. Yeah.
But again, that's such a simple kind of statement that's, so easy to make you give up and just say, okay, I guess that's true. So it's never going to work on the Strip, instead of focusing on what advantages do the Strip have. I mean, on a Friday or Saturday night, how many tens of thousands of people are on the Strip, and how can I get them to come in out of the heat for 3 hours, sit here, have some beers, and watch a game that they can walk 100 feet and place a bet on.
It's true. Yeah. Now, being on the expansion and relocation board, were teams tied into how many years that they had to say that they were going to be in the league? Because we heard in later years where they were, like I'll give an example. I think it was the Pittsburgh Power, a 3-year contract with the league itself. At that time, was the league saying you have to be in the league in X amount of years? No,
I mean you can't. It's like belonging to a club. You can't force someone to be a member.
Right.
If they no longer want to come and eat dinner or play golf or whatever you do at that club,
yeah,
you can't go out and handcuff them and drag them there.
Right.
So we had. Again, tried a bunch of different things, where, people would have to post a $100,000 or $250,000 letter of credit, like a performance bond, that could be drawn upon if they didn't. But usually, if someone didn't come back, they were so upside down, not paying their bills, that you need that money to pay their player payroll or something.
Right.
So okay. Certainly by that time you realize, hey, this person doesn't have enough money. It's not worth spending $200,000 in legal fees in federal court over the next 2 or 3 years to force them to do something they don't want to do.
Okay, makes sense. Now, 95 for you. Now, you'd already been with a very successful franchise since 91. A major part in the head office. How did you get involved with the expansion of Memphis Pharaohs?
Well, the old Godfather line. I got an offer I couldn't refuse.
Now, were
know,
you there
I
originally as a partner, or did they ask you to come on as GM, but they offered you a partnership?
No, that was part of the deal from day one.
Okay.
Be the executive VP and general manager and a limited partner, and so I had the percentage was good, the salary was good, the relocation stipend was good, and again, I'm a creator builder kind of thing, and in Orlando, by that point we had sold out every game for 2.5 years. We're selling every season ticket we could. We're doing great in the sponsorship area, and it was just kind of a time for a change of scenery. And I had been to Memphis the year before, reviewing an expansion candidate that did not come through.
Okay.
And had met the people at the Pyramid Arena and developed a nice relationship. And actually the guy at the time, Jerry McDonald, who was running the Pyramid, had previously been in Lakeland, Florida, and he had been the boss of the lady who was the manager of the Orlando Arena. So, it was at that time there were like 2 or 3 companies that managed all the arenas in the United States. So like everybody knew everybody, and that particular company was Leisure Management, and then you had Spectacor. Philadelphia had a whole bunch of the other arenas. So, anyway, I liked the town. I had established a relationship. My ex-wife at the time, she had gone to the University of Alabama, which wasn't that far away, and kind of liked the whole deep South thing. And we had friends there. She had sorority sisters there, so we thought, let's try it.
What were the challenges versus what you did for the startup of the Predators versus the Memphis Pharaohs? How different were they?
Not
because you're basically starting from scratch.
Yeah, and but at that point you've got the benefit of experience. I mean, you know the things you need to do. The checklist, if you will. Mm-hmm. But then the challenge is figuring out the market and figuring out what will work, because the way it's presented in Orlando is not necessarily going to make it work in another city. But we had to figure that out. And then actually not long after we had announced our team and set up shop, then here come the Memphis Mad Dogs.
Yes.
And of course they were more, their ownership was Fred Smith of FedEx, and their head coach was Pepper Rogers, both of whom were, deeply rooted in that community. So, we had the added challenge of being perceived as the outsiders against the old boys. But we were both playing some weird version of football indoors. They were playing CFL ball.
Yep.
Neither which most people had seen. But, we just had to figure out what would work in the market and build an organization from scratch.
And one of the things that I remember the most about the Pharaohs franchise is you were able to market the team basically to the name itself. Still to this day, even though the Pharaohs came in the same year that the Iowa Barnstormers did with which everybody calls the iconic goggles.
Right.
You still have a very unique headdress set up on the helmets for the Pharaohs. Very unique. And I don't think anybody had seen anything like that in football at all.
No, never. I mean, we were really proud of that. That was a cool look. And of course the whole, Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt, it's on the Nile. We're on the Mississippi. We got the Pyramid Arena.
I was about to say, you're playing in a pyramid.
Yeah. I mean, there was just, it was a no-brainer. We had to be the Pharaohs.
That was, yeah. At any time. So compared to the Predators, almost Pharaohs was almost the name from the beginning. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, always, there's certain things when you're starting a team, you always need to go through the motions.
Right.
So you have a name the team contest, and someone can win some season tickets, and you have player tryouts. There's the basic things that you're always expected to do. But yeah, we knew that it was going to be Pharaohs from day one.
And again, still today, I think it's one of the iconic looks. It's funny that people say, "Oh, well, they look too much like the Arena League." Uniforms look like the Arena League, or the names look like the Arena League. To me, that's a compliment, because the Arena League came up with some very unique looks.
Oh, there's so much stuff that started in the Arena League that cross-pollinated into the four major leagues, whether it's playing music between plays and getting more creative with logos and uniforms and all that. Yeah, a lot of stuff came out of the Arena League.
Yeah, or even more recently, when it comes to transparent replays.
Mike's in the huddle and quarterbacks mic'd up, all that kind of stuff.
People forget that, and it's true because people forget that they were mic'd up coaches in year one on ESPN. A lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
So, why was Don Freese your head coach that year?
Well, we interviewed 6 people for a head coach, and I, just like I gave credit to other people in Orlando, I give tons of credit to the late Pete Catella for helping me put that organization together. And when I was starting to put the team together, and I called up Gene Nudo in the league office, and I asked him, I said, who should I bring in as my director of football operations? And he said, there's one name in the league. That's Pete Catella. You need to get him out of Arizona. And I called Brian Colangelo, and he gave me permission to talk to Pete, and actually just, again, right place, right time. It happened that Pete's father-in-law was living in Memphis and was elderly and ill. So it was a chance for he and his wife to move and be closer to her father in his declining state. So Pete's the one who he was from a very impressive football tree, going back to Jack Christensen and Bill Walsh, Walt Harris, all these West Coast offense guys. In addition to Pete's background in the NFL and the CFL. And so Pete had spent some time, well, again, all these guys had been in all these different leagues. I mean, that PSFL that we talked about earlier that never got off the ground in 92.
Yeah.
Pete was the head coach of, I don't know, the Carolina team or something. Okay. And Daryl Rogers, another wonderful man who just passed away a couple of years ago, he was coach of the Arkansas team. Well, I knew Daryl going back to Michigan State when I was an undergrad, and he was our head coach. But so Daryl was one of the other people we interviewed besides Don. And Tim Markham called me up and recommended that we look at a guy named Larry Keck, who had been he had coached with Tim in Detroit one season, I'm not sure which, and then he had been the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, and their staff had just gotten fired. So there were about 6 guys, but Don, Don had the right background. He had played defensive back at Oregon. He was there at the same time John Hadel was. He had been the wide receivers coach under Bill McCarthy on the Colorado National Championship team. When Uh, Jerry DiNardo, who had been the offensive coordinator of that team, when he got the head job at Vanderbilt, he took Don to Vanderbilt with him as his offensive coordinator. And so DiNardo had just left Vanderbilt to go to LSU and didn't take Don with him, so Don was available. And also in Don's background, he had, in the USFL, he had coached for the Denver Gold under Mouse Davis. Well, Mouse helped Jim Foster design the game of arena football.
Yep.
That's all based on the Mouse Davis run and shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a guy that he's got a national championship ring from college. He's played major college football. He's been an offensive coordinator in D1, and he's got a run and shoot background, West Coast offense background. So it was, and he and Pete had known each other, so it was a good fit.
Which do you find to be more successful, your first year with the Pharaohs or the first year with the Predators? I mean, record-wise, yes, the Pharaohs were better.
Yeah.
But in your opinion?
Well, no, I think the first year with the Pharaohs, I think 95, the Pharaohs did better than the Predators did in 91.
Mm-hmm.
But selfishly, I wasn't running the Predators in 91.
Right.
but again, we had the benefit of experience. I had a rock solid football operation and pretty darn solid front office staff, and like I say, we went 6-6 and made the playoffs, and Pete found us some great players out of the West Coast: Troy Kopp, Jeff Russell, Ryan Benjamin. We had some players on that team.
Yeah. Seems to be a big change for you in '96. Why the step away from the Pharaohs to be a consultant for Gridiron Enterprises for their European division with Bill Nero and Jerry Kurz?
Yeah. Well, when we got into the first off season with the Pharaohs, it became clear that there was a bit of a schism in the ownership group. Mm-hmm. We had a great group of guys. I loved all of them. Kevin Hunter was the lead guy initially. He passed away a couple of years ago, and it was just sorry to see him gone at such a young age. But there were just some things that were happening that I wasn't comfortable being associated with.
Okay.
So part of my agreement when I went up there is I had in my contract that I had an out clause that I could exercise by a certain date, and they had to pay me a certain amount of money. And so I could kind of see the way things were headed going into 96. And actually, I think we had 2 preseason games in 96. Like we played Charlotte in Birmingham, and then we went down to Palm Beach and played the Bobcats, and we lost both those games. And back in Memphis, things weren't looking so hot, so I exercised my option and went back to Orlando.
Okay. How'd you get before we talk about your experience with Gridiron and the European stuff? You also had a hand in you were part of the relocation committee to help approve of David Baker's group to move the team from Las Vegas, which we talked about just a little while ago, to Anaheim.
Yeah.
And everybody knows where Commissioner Baker is now. He became the commissioner. He's now the president of the Professional Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah. That was kind of all. Obviously after the '95 season, the McFarland group, they had tried MGM Arena, they had tried Thomas and Mack, and they were ready to throw in a towel. And it was clear to everyone in the league that, you know, if they didn't find a buyer, they were probably gonna sell. So when I don't remember whether Jim Drucker found Baker's group or whether it was actually the McFarland people in Las Vegas who found them and brought them to us, but you know, David Baker was kind of the lead guy in the group, but he was, you know, he had two very big money, rock solid investors with him. So, you know, the deal was not done because of David Baker. Right. It was done because of the guys with the money behind David Baker.
Okay.
And you know, but then, you know, going a little further down the line, you know, it's obvious that, you know, they must have, because they weren't that successful in Anaheim, they must have churned through a bunch of money out there, and that's a very expensive money I operate in.
Yep.
So, you know, the money guys were probably reaching the point where they're sitting across the table looking at Baker and saying, you know, we're not going to do this much longer. You know, either fix it or we're out of here. Mm-hmm. And so David created his own exit strategy to go to the league and become commissioner.
Yeah. And all the times that you were part of the relocation and expansion committee, because I think that went another year to 96. What was the franchise that you had the most fun bringing into the league?
Oh, gosh. God. I can't put one above another because, I mean, they all, you know, they were all brand new toys at the time. And, you know, we were wishing everybody nothing but success. And, you know, it's like, I think when in your podcast you did with Bob Grease, he kind of hinted at it, you know, every year at some, you know, we typically would have 4 face-to-face board meetings and then, you know, multiple teleconferences
right
during the year, but, you know, it was like clockwork. At one of those 4 meetings every year, Bob Grease would stand and say, we ought to pass a rule that nobody's allowed to speak in board meetings until they've lost $1 million. You know, because, you know, you have people who are fresh into it. They've never owned or operated a sports team or done any kind of event business in the past. You know, maybe they've been extremely successful doing something else, making a product, selling a product, something. And people generally, when they're really successful at something, think they're going to be successful at everything.
Right.
And they come in and they're all full of vim and vigor and, you know, why don't we do this? Why don't we change this? Let's spend money on that. And the people who've been around it for a little while and, no, okay, we tried that and lost money on that. We tried that. That was unsuccessful. So it was fun to watch each new group come in and how they made it and so forth. And I wish more had been successful and we'd still have a league.
Yeah. One thing I found was weird in 95, you know, part of that expansion for St. Louis, you know, a game just popped up recently on YouTube where it was a home game for them. And I happened to see that their boards are like up to their ankles. They're not a full-size board. And I'm like, that made no sense to me. I don't know if you guys had any say, because obviously it's the team that's putting up the boards and stuff like that. But those little things, I think, to me, stand out. But
yeah, I'll have to go look for that because we played the first or second game of the 95 season, I think it was. We went up there and played them in the Kiel Center, and I don't remember anything unusual like that.
I'll have to find it and send you the timestamp specifically because I noticed it the other day. And you know, it's funny. I think it was Memphis playing at St. Louis. But anyways, I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But one last thing before we talk about the European portion of your career. Can Can you give us a little bit of insight on the sale or the moving of Fort Worth to Mexico City, and then the failure of that team to start up? Can you give any insight on that?
Yeah. Well, of course, Woody had the team in Fort Worth the 1 year, and then he bought Tampa from Bob, and so he was looking to dispose of Fort Worth. And there was a fellow by the name of Doug Logan, who Doug is bilingual, Spanish and English, and he'd been in the event promotion business forever. And I think he knew Jim Drucker.
Okay.
From the business. And whether Drucker approached him or he approached Drucker, whatever. Anyway, so they came up with the idea, and everyone thought it was pretty neat. I mean, everybody was on board. Let's do it. This will be special. It's, again, something else PR-wise that'll set us apart from other leagues, being truly international with a regular season schedule, not just exhibitions.
Right.
But then there was some oil crisis or financial crisis or something that happened in Mexico that severely devalued the peso. And it became apparent that it was going to dramatically financially affect not only the Mexico City teams, but teams that went down there to play them. And so it just the mood of the board changed as far as having the team in Mexico City. And then about that, during that same relative period of time, Doug Logan got hired as the first commissioner of the MLS.
Okay.
Right? And so then that's when Tom Scallon and the Minnesota Fighting Pike came into the picture.
Okay.
Because again, these guys in the event promotion business, in the arena operation business, there's a lot of people who know each other. And Jim Drucker, from having been in the Continental Basketball Association previously, he knew a lot of these arena people around the country. And so that was, one of the benefits to him when he was brought in as commissioner, that, he had those contacts, notwithstanding his relationship with Joe O'Hara. But I think that either Jim or Doug, or maybe both of them, knew Tom Scallon in Minnesota. And at the time, Tom Scallon owned the Harlem Globetrotters. So, he knew how to put on sports events and how to run sports events and things. So even though it was kind of late in the off season, everyone thought, well, this guy's got a fighting chance of pulling it off. So that's kind of how Minnesota came about for '96 instead of Mexico City.
Yeah, because I remember I'm looking at and I remember seeing this specifically because it was as you said, it was putting the Arena Football League on the map, because on September 27th of '94. In the New York, this made the New York Times. This is at the time also where the AP is covered everywhere also, mind you. But arena football set for Mexico City.
Yeah.
And it gave the league, I think, that little bit of off-season push that they needed at that time.
No.
But as you said, finances, all, as we're seeing even today, finances can be the death of everything.
Yeah. No, and of course the same issues came up when when the subject of Canadian franchises came up. The same kind of issues, exchange rates, travel costs, customs, taxes. Just there's a lot of things that the average person doesn't realize come into play.
That's true, because for the longest time, Vancouver was always a part of the rumors to be there was an ownership group looking to bring a team to Vancouver or Toronto. And it's funny, the differences, how things, I guess, somewhat changed between that time when you were on the expansion committee to when the Phantoms came in 2001. Mind you, it was through a move, but still how things have changed. Even today, the board is the board is a lot different than it was back then.
Yeah, and then, of course, we had going back to 95, 96, or 95 anyway, we had the CFL in I guess 93, 94, 95, and, with teams in the United States, and, that caused a big upheaval too. It affected potential markets. It affected the availability of coaches and players. And so all that, you don't operate in a vacuum. You're affected by everything else around you.
Yep. I mean, and people need to remember too that the league did try, besides the European exhibitions, they did bring a preseason exhibition to Hull, Quebec, which is just outside of Ottawa, in '92. It was Detroit and Tampa Bay, if I remember correctly. No, Albany and Tampa Bay in '92. So it's not that the league didn't try; it's there are more variables and more factors that fans did not know about that were, that the league was looking at.
And a lot of those exhibition games, again, they were underwritten by the arena operator in that city, maybe along with a potential owner, trying to, so, as that one in Quebec was, they failed the test. So.
Well, they failed the test too, but also I thought was interesting and I'd love to be able to speak with somebody who knew more about it, but it's the first time that technically the CFL and the Arena Football League went head to head, so to speak, because the game was originally supposed to be in Ottawa, but because of the CFL ownership group with the Ottawa Rough Riders at that time,
the Glebermans.
They didn't want you there. They were saying, "Oh, this, that, and the other," but it's basically different sports trying to get people to come in and pay money to watch their sport. But I mean, it's
and again, like we were talking about, just the relationship. Before we got on the air, the relationship between Arena Fan and the Arena League. For it's short-sighted. Just because you're two different leagues doesn't mean one necessarily has to be a winner and one necessarily has to be a loser. If you do it right, you both can be winners.
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting subject here that I'm really pumped to hear about. And as I said, you were a consultant for Gridiron Enterprises, Jerry Kerr's, Bill Nero, with the European development. And in '96, that there have been exhibitions before that have been going on. You yourself had been part of the organization and the presentation of the European exhibition since '91. But what attracted you to trying out just exhibitions? Because obviously it's more than just a single game, than just putting on a single game in one different city. What pulled you into that to join Bill and Jerry?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the tours of Spain and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, well, again, they were looking to expand their footprint over there, and again, it's all about partnerships and relationships, and the partner that Gridiron had in Paris was just this wonderful gentleman who was part American, part French, named Andy Dixon. His father had been a U.S. Air Force pilot in the Second World War and had stayed over there after the war, married a French gal, and became a boxing promoter. And his son grew up in the promotion business. And the way arena event well, in stadium event promotion works in most European cities is each city, each arena will have a relationship with a small group of promoters, 2, 3, 4 guys. And those are the only guys who can bring events to that building. It's not like in the United States where everything's wide open. Anybody with money can try and do something.
Right.
So because these relationships are very controlled, there's a lot of partnerships developed across borders. So like, Andy, he's got an exclusive at the Palais Omnisport Bercy, but, he may know Jose down in Madrid who's got an exclusive at that arena, and they each want to do business in each other's building. So they do business together. They build joint ventures and cooperative deals. And so all these relationships with the other arenas around Europe all flowed out of Andy Dixon's relationships with these other buildings, combined with, Bill and Jerry's desire to expand the footprint with the ultimate goal of trying to establish a league over there. Mm-hmm. And at that 96 game in Paris, we had people from every American Football Federation board from every country in Europe there in Paris for the game, for meetings, presentations. Had people from the major countries playing American football or France, Germany, and Italy, but then you've got the UK, Finland, Spain. There's a lot of kind of pro-am leagues over there, people playing American football. And over the years, I'd built some relationships, particularly with a couple of guys that had a couple of teams in Munich, Germany. And I went over several times and went to like the Euro Cup or whatever they called their championships, and just over a couple of years got to know a lot of these other people. So, we were working hard to try and get people interested in maybe having a league over there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it just again it comes down to money. Who's got the money to invest? The structure over there is a little different because everything, even the big Champions League soccer teams, they're all clubs, and in most of their cities they don't even have to pay rent for their arena or their stadium, because they're a kind of a non-profit club structure. Yeah. Except for the ones that American billionaires have gone over there and bought in the last decade. But so it didn't take a lot of money to get things started over there, but it kind of never developed that critical mass where, you have 2 or 3 people starting to say, yeah, I'm in. What about you? You come in too. And, to get 6 or 8 to start with.
And the talk for the European League went all the way back to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was 1990. At least that was in the newspaper or the football magazines back then. I think it was like First and 10 or something like that, or the local newspapers there where the game was played.
Well, and I mean, you had again, it's all about business, and mm-hmm. you had Bill, Jerry, Jim Foster, and a fourth partner, Mark Higley. They owned Gridiron, which Gridiron owned the patent once the patent was issued in 1990. Yeah. And then they were able to get a second patent in Europe. So even after, so actually the impetus came even more for them to try and develop a European league after they sold the patent to the Arena League to the U.S. League. They sold the U.S. patent. They did not sell the foreign patent. They kept that. So,
okay.
So when they sold the U.S. patent to the Will Maris group in 97, 98, whenever it was, then, that gave them even more impetus. Okay, we've cashed that out. We're not going to get any more royalty payments. We're not going to get any more money from the U.S. So let's see if we can do something with it overseas.
Okay. It's interesting. Actually, it's one thing I didn't know. I did not know that Gridiron had sold it off. That's cool to find out. It's funny that the first year that you become a consultant, it can't hurt that you have Kurt Warner playing Eddie Brown in Paris.
That was awesome.
And on top of that, which I don't know if you know, just recently, that game has been put onto YouTube.
Yeah, I watched it and saw myself wandering through the background a couple times. But one of the cool things with that, with that whole group of people that we had from all these European leagues there, we're all staying in the same hotel. The players from the two teams, the coaches, all these prospective European owners, and I had also there were a couple of guys. Like one was from Wheeling, West Virginia. Another guy from Philadelphia, I think. There were sports agents, and I had brought kind of lower level sports agents who had some experience placing U.S. players on some of these European teams.
Okay.
And so I invited a couple of them to come along and sit in on the meetings too, to basically assure the potential European owners that they'd have no problem getting some American players, to seed their teams. And but kind of observing all these meetings and these activities and everything was Kurt Warner. And one evening when my wife and I were walking back in the hotel lobby after dinner, the players would typically just congregate around tables in the hotel lobby. And I walked in and Kurt got up and said, can I talk to you a minute? And kind of pulled me aside. My wife went on up to our room, and we went over to the bar and had a beer. And he said, or I had a beer, he didn't, but he actually said, "Why don't you be my agent?" Those words came out of Kurt Warner's mouth.
Wow,
in
that's
Paris.
Cool.
And of course, I wasn't an agent. I didn't have any interest in being an agent. I had kind of researched it and at that point, to become an NFL agent, you had to there was a course that the NFLPA sponsored that was I think at the University of Wisconsin. It was like a 1-week course. You had to pay $1,800, go through this 1-week course, take a class, and then you were a registered NFLPA agent. And I gave it about 30 seconds thought and said, maybe I should spend the $1,800. And I said, no, Kurt, I'm not an agent. And I walked him over and introduced him to the guy, John something or other, the guy from West Virginia. I said, now this guy is a sports agent. Why don't you talk to him? And the rest is history.
About saying rest is history. He gets signed. Didn't he find out in Paris that he was going to the World League?
No, I think it was later on after that, because at that time, you had to be nominated to the World League by an NFL team.
Okay.
The World League teams could not sign you. Now, if a World League coach really wanted you, he'd get one of his buddies in the United States to put you on one of those, 1,000-player off-season rosters, so you could get nominated. But I think it was a while after that before he actually, got his spot. And I think it was I know his agent was from Chicago, but I don't know whether it was the Chicago Bears that nominated him or or somebody else. But.
Okay. After 96, there doesn't seem to be, at least that I could do through research, because I've done quite a bit of historical research on the European exhibitions, but there doesn't seem to be any more games in Europe post 1996. Is because Paris seemed to be the city that the league always went to, because they always drew.
Well,
Drew.
And that's also because they had a 10-year contract with Coca-Cola that was paying $100,000 a year to put on that game.
Okay. That's okay. Did not know that. That's interesting. Okay, so contract.
So
89.
96 was the last year of that contract. Though maybe it wasn't a 10-year, maybe it was 8 years.
Okay.
But anyway, 96 was the last year of the contract. I think Coca-Cola was willing to renew, but the terms were going to be different. Mm-hmm. And then it was just, we had gone through that 96 game. If you watch that tape, there was nobody there. And I know I'd put a comment on YouTube, don't know whether you saw it, but the reason why there was a huge transportation strike that week.
Oh, that was your comment. Okay. Yes, I do remember seeing that.
So the subways are down, so nobody could get there. They actually, the people who did get there either had to pay for very expensive taxis, walk miles, or they had even, the city of Paris set up water taxis on the Seine, so people could move about the city, and the arena, the Palais Omnisport sits right on the Seine River in Paris.
Okay.
So people could actually take water taxis. But yeah, I mean, it always had been mostly full, but there was that, and then either 1 or 2 years prior to that, there was something else. I want to say like a air traffic controller strike or something, but like 2 out of those last 3 years, there were major events that affected it and caused the game to lose money and have lower attendance and so forth. So that kind of took a little bit of the bloom off the rose over there.
Isn't that kind of why? Because I know you did quite a few of the games. Is that kind of why they only went to Germany once? Because that game is also available too. It's just that there's hardly anybody in the crowd in Frankfurt.
Yeah. Just didn't work for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I really was involved in the promotion of that, and then like the Spanish games. I mean, they did reasonably well, but they were all in really, most of them except for the Barcelona were in small arenas.
Okay.
So I mean, 4,000, 5,000 seat arenas.
Okay.
But,
right. So in Granada or in Madrid and Zaragoza in 95, they were in smaller arenas.
Smaller arenas, and same thing when we were in. I guess that was either 90, maybe that was 96 also, when it was Oviedo and Barcelona.
That was late 95. Sorry, I have to mention that too. Yeah, late 95.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now also it did, from what I saw too from the Paris game, as much as the game itself changed in North America, it seemed that it's funny how the field and the game system itself did, it was stuck in time, so to speak. It was stuck back in 1990 or 1989, whenever the first one, when 89 when the first one occurred, because the boards were back, there were sidelines once again.
Yep. Well, and of course that was all determined by arena floor size.
Sure.
And that's a big arena there because they have Olympic ice, and then actually something you can't really see from the TV pictures, but it's really cool. There's actually a velodrome built into that arena.
Oh, cool.
And about the lower, maybe 1/3 of the seats are removable, and then they expose that bicycle racing track. And
which, if people don't know, that velodromes go at a very steep incline.
Yeah, it's crazy when you'd walk through the tunnels, the field entrance from the backstage areas, and you'd pass and see a section of the velodrome track underneath the stands. That's scary steep.
What did you do for the last couple of years as that you were a consultant, considering that there doesn't seem to be any more games from 96, and it doesn't seem to be in any European city after that? What did you do to assist them?
Well, what we did is we took a different approach. I mean, they had tried the exhibition games for 8 or 9 years. We had made the effort to try and attract owners to create a league via the football federations over there, and that hadn't worked. We'd attracted a lot of attention, but the ultimate goal wasn't met. So what we did is we tried to, because even after Gridiron had sold the U.S. patent, one thing that they still had rights to under contract was they got all the game tapes, all the TV game tapes from every U.S. game that was on TV, whether it was a local, regional, or national broadcast. So we had a huge library of, original, master tapes, if you will, of all these games.
Right.
So, kind of about, in the late 90s, I had invested in a business in Orlando that was a film and video post-production company. And we had editing studios to do TV work and commercials and so forth. So with that facility available, we got together with Bill and Jerry, and we decided that we would try and repackage the TV broadcasts and see if we could syndicate them in foreign TV markets.
Okay.
So we would actually bring tapes in and cut them, put new voiceovers and so forth, and then for 2 or 3 years, each fall, there's a big international sports television trade show in Monaco.
Okay.
So we went to Monaco for those 2 or 3 years and had a booth in the trade show, and made connections with people all over the world, and tried to syndicate arena football game tapes. So that was kind of the effort then, and we had a little success in the Far East, in Japan, and but that was about it. And again, it was kind of cool to go to Monaco for a week each year. And
for sure. Who wouldn't want to go to Monaco, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it did, if I'm not mistaken, from what you guys were doing, as you said, having success in the Far East, I think it also led to what was, after the AF2 was created, them having a camp there in Australia and New Zealand, etc. I think that led to that Pacific Rim Training Camp. That's what it was called, Pacific Rim Training Camp. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, Jerry, just whatever else he was doing, whether it was AF2, whether it was commissioner of the league, Jerry never gave up, chasing the overseas dreams, and whether it was finally getting Jaworski and Judge involved in the China League, or like I say, the training camps in Australia. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's only one way to expand the footprint, is to roll up your shirt sleeves and go do it.
Exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know if you know this or not, because when the history the research that I was doing of the European stuff, I came across that, Jerry seemed to be all in, because if I'm not mistaken, he had an office in London or Paris for specifically the European portion, I guess, the European development of the Arena League. But that's all I was able to find, was that he had set something up over in Europe when it came to an address, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, I mean, that might have been later on. Or you might have found something in a Google search, obviously for their, I mean, because Gridiron was a U.S. company, and then Andy Dixon, the promoter in Paris, he had his company. So then the joint venture that Gridiron put together with Andy's company, they had to form an entity. I believe it was like Channel Islands or something, but they had to form an entity over there to, to do the business, and register with the proper authorities and so forth. So, what you found may have just been that entity registration or something.
It's possible. 2002, you're heading back home, so to speak. I mean, after '99, you got out of the arena. It was all together. You got out of the AFL. Is that correct?
Well, I mean '96 really. I mean, because it was strictly just the European stuff, and that was just a small portion of the year. I was off doing lots of other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but in 2002, you return home with the Predators. You become a partner again and a consultant, and you're also teaming up with Bob Grease, who with Gladiators and Tampa Bay Storm fame became part of the ownership group also. What pulled you back into the AFL?
Well, I mean, Bob did. We'd always had, we had a friendly rivalry between Orlando and Tampa, and then of course he sold Tampa about the same time as I left and went to Memphis, and we weren't in touch for a while, but then I forget exactly what got us back in touch, but we started talking and emailing occasionally, and and probably in the late '90s, just more sharing observations of the league from afar. And then when I got a call from him one day, I guess it was probably sometime in 2002, and he said, "You're never going to believe this," and he had basically taken a controlling financial interest in the Predators, and it was kind of word on the street around Orlando for a while that there was some financial difficulties in that organization. So it was good to see Bob step in, but part of he asked me, he said, what made the Predators special back in the early days? And I had always thought that what it was we, in our ownership group, even though it wasn't a huge amount of money that other than Davey at the beginning had in, that any one person had in, we had like 20-25 people who were movers and shakers about town. Right. I mean, we had former congressmen, we had big time doctors, big time attorneys, lots of different business involvement that meant political involvement and so forth. So, by that time with the Predators, it was basically, Brett Bushy and his group of stockholders that the Predators had been basically a penny stock for years. And there were a lot of different people in and out of that investment over the years, and but nobody was from Orlando, and so Bob said, will you help me get Orlando people involved in this again? So when I knew a lot of Orlando people, so I said okay, and I helped them get a bunch of people involved.
Did you find that having to recruit 12 people, because we've seen before where sometimes too many cooks can swallow the broth? I'll give a good example as being the Montreal Expos. That's a very good example right before they're bought by Major League Baseball. But did you find that having 12 owners having bits and pieces of the team caused more issues than may necessarily need to have been?
No, because again, this is not major investment money.
Right.
I mean, if someone's worth several $1 million and they're putting $50,000 into something for 2% of something, they do it with the attitude that they're never going to see that money again. They hope they will, but so at the same time, they also understand that they're passive, silent investors. Okay. So, have fun with it. Tell your friends and neighbors you're a part owner. When you're in the bar or on the golf course, tell everybody, pass around your business cards that say partner, because that's all good for marketing. And and then if the organization needs something that falls into your particular area of expertise, we're having trouble finding a good deal for decent apartments for the players to live in, and you're a major real estate attorney in town who has clients who are apartment developers, help us get one of those guys to help us, that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's why you want, long tentacles into your local market, so that it's not so much that they're going to make a lot of money from it, but that they can have fun with it and they can help supply the needs of the organization. Okay, makes sense.
And for you, you're back with the Predators. You can't get over that hump. You go to you guys go to a championship in 2002, and sometimes they say the saying with what is the bridesmaid's never a bride.
Yeah.
It unfortunately for you that you just could never get that ring, could you?
Well, I did get a ring, but not contemporaneously. One thing that Bob was nice enough to do was he actually when we brought all these owners in, the new Orlando partners,
right.
As part of the deal is Bob bought everybody Predators championship rings, and you had your choice of the 98 style or the 2000 style.
Oh, cool. Oh, okay, that's neat.
So I have a 2000 Predators championship ring, even though I had no involvement that year.
Still, it's a ring, right?
Yep.
What made you finally step away? Because after 2004, it seems like you totally washed your hands of everything. What made you finally step away from arena football?
Well, I had, again, what Bob had asked help with, and some, reestablishing some sponsorship relationships, bringing in some local owners. Mm-hmm. Basically, I'd fulfilled my mission, and I was just kind of tired of it after so many years, and my principal business at that time, which again, since I had left Memphis in the spring of '96, I'd been doing other things with most of my time, and I had started a business in late '97, early 1998 that by 2004 was really doing well and demanding a lot of my time, and a lot of my time was being spent out of the country. So I just I didn't have the time to devote to it.
Looking back, obviously, as you and I are talking right now, the league went through its, when I look at the history of the AFL, there are 4 dates in AFL history, and all of them, unfortunately, are when the league is threatened to close or folded, came back, folded, et cetera, et cetera. For you, being that now the league does not exist anymore, at least as the moment, We don't know if it's going to come back or not. I think that's the first question I want to ask you. I know from what you've seen, you're listening to the different podcasts that we put out. I'm sure you've watched it from time to time. In your opinion, do you think, if done right, the AFL could return in the new norm?
I always have and always will.
Good. I'm with you there. From the time that you were with the Arena Football League, whether you were an executive or whether you were on one of the boards or whether you're part of the Predators or whatever you did, what else you did, what's the one thing that's going to stand out to you the most? If you were to give a story, somebody were to run into you, on the street, for you to tell them something about arena football, what would you tell them, Eric?
Oh, gosh, there are so many cool stories. Met so many cool people along the time. Had so many neat experiences. But I guess because of how the most recent version of the league ended, mm-hmm. which is the same way that the Alliance League ended last year, and it did not need to happen. It's workers' comp. Mm-hmm. And we knew it was a problem back in 1992. The league tackled the problem in 1994 and had it solved. And somewhere along the line, whether it was because once the CBA went into place, they didn't think they had to worry about it as much, or with all the NFL people coming in during that period, just there wasn't time to focus on it. But I mean, that was always the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. And the elephant was put in a cage for a while, and it was let back out, and it ate the league. And it was totally unnecessary. It did not have to happen.
How were you able? Because obviously people should remember. Because I mentioned it before in other podcasts, especially actually the one with Commissioner O'Hara. The Albany Firebirds. Their offices were in Vermont, so technically they weren't in Vermont. In Albany, they were in Vermont to deal with workers' comp.
Yeah.
How did the league solve that problem back then?
Yeah. Well, you have to think workers' comp as a system is designed to be punitive against an employer whose employees get hurt on the job. Mm-hmm. Okay? And it's designed to protect the employees and to punish the employers. Okay? Right. Well, professional sports just should not be under workers' comp.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, every hockey player, every baseball player, every football player, every basketball player, in the course of however long their seasons are, they're going to get hurt. It may be a knee, might be just an ankle, whatever. It may not be a major, may be minor, but it's something that at the end of the season, they could say, I can't work because of this injury sustained during the season, and I won't be able to work until this is fixed.
Right.
Okay. So all the major leagues, they have worked out statutory exemptions, and they self-insure. Okay. In 1994, we had a committee, and Woody and I were kind of the prime players in it. And, Woody had the background with the nursing homes and the health business, and Glenn Missoula up in Albany, he had nursing homes too, so he was somewhat familiar with the health business. Right. And we retained an attorney that I knew in Orlando, specialized in his practice. The league retained him to research the issue for us and write a legal opinion. And one of the things he found that there were 3 states at that time in the country that had complete exemptions for professional athletes. and those were Florida, Texas, and Massachusetts.
Okay.
Well, of course, that's why Joe O'Hara went to Massachusetts, and of course Woody was in Texas, and then he moved to Florida.
Yep.
But these people in these other states, they had issues. So we came up with a program where we could largely self-insure, because all workers' comp falls under a thing called the ERISA Act. Can't remember what ERISA stands for, but it's federal legislation going back to the late 70s. And as long as you do certain alternative things, you don't have to have the workers' comp, even in states where they say you do. So there's exemptions written into the law where you don't have to have workers' comp, and that's basically if you have a self-insurance program. So, if you go to you watch just about any sporting event in an arena, you'll always see a sideboard banner for an orthopedic doctor group. Well, in most of those, what those orthopedic doctor groups are, they're quite frankly, they're writing a large check to the team for a sponsorship, and in return, they're going to get all that work. They're going to get all the knees and shoulders and elbows and ankles, and then they can turn around and bill that work to what an insurance company or whoever's going to pay for it, and that doctor group will make back 5 times the cost of that sponsorship.
Okay.
They're buying a book of business. So, so teams were happy to take the $50,000 or $75,000 a year from the orthopedic groups, but then the orthopedic groups were billing the heck out of workers' comp all out season and driving the rates up. So we got everybody convinced, okay, give the orthopedic group the sponsorship, but instead of taking the money, take the first $50,000 or $75,000 in services. Don't let them bill it to workers' comp, and then go get a sponsorship with a local MRI company. So you got somebody who can do MRIs for free or greatly reduced cost. And then I worked out a national sponsorship with Health South, which is gone now, but that time they were around, and they were a national chain of rehab clinics.
Okay, yeah, so I recognize the name.
Wherever our players went to in their off season, they had a deal. They could go get their rehab, and we didn't have to pay for it. Because normally, rehab is prescribed, and every time they go to the rehab clinic, there's a bill for $35, $50, $75 going to the insurance company.
Right.
And then in the next year, your rates go up. So again, we identified what we could do to avoid work comp, came up with a system to implement it, and everything was cool. And sometime after I left, they took their eye off the ball, and it eventually ruined the thing. And I know at one point they had talked about, I think they had a league office set up in Fort Lauderdale for a while, and that was solely because, they did the single entity thing where all player contracts were signed with an entity in Florida trying to use the Florida exemption of work comp to get out of work comp. That was the sole reason for having a Fort Lauderdale office.
Okay. Drucker. I think Drucker moved the league office down there.
And that's why, Glenn artificially moved the Firebirds to Vermont. That's why in the Alliance League last year, the Orlando Apollos, Steve Spurrier's team, about halfway through the season, they moved to Georgia.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
And of course that's why their owner folded the league, because he saw the same thing that the Arena League saw.
Oh boy.
All work comp. So for me, that's kind of the singular big story. It's not the most fun story. The getting Shaq for the coin toss was fun. The day Terry Bradshaw dropped into our office unannounced and sat there for 3 hours just telling stories with cool. Terry. I mean,
That's cool.
I mean, just all the different coaches and their experiences. I mean, walking through the Memphis airport with Pete Catello one day, we're going to catch a flight, and somebody yells out, "Coach!" And we turned around, and it was Warren Moon. And he was just changing planes in Memphis, but Pete had been his coach in Edmonton.
Yeah.
It was just cool things like that happen, that stand out in your mind.
Being that that Orlando really was your home when it came to the Arena League, but I mean, unless you want to mention it to everybody, if you're able to tell fans, whether it be in Orlando or the entire league, one particular thing, what would you want to tell them?
Well, be ready, because someday, sometime, I believe somebody's going to try and bring it back. Keep the faith. I mean, I know we had a group that started in Orlando way back in 91 or 92 as a fan club. Originally, they were the In Your Face fan club, and then they changed their name to something else. But they have an active Facebook page, and they're posting on there every day. They're remembering players' birthdays and coaches' birthdays, and if a player who played 20 years ago has a kid or a grandkid, it's on that website.
Wow!
And
now I know where that comes from. I did not know that.
Yeah. So it's of course right now, because the Predators as a name are a team in the Bushie Siegfried League, whatever, the National Arena League, with, I guess they ended up not playing this year, but I guess Ben Bennett was supposed to be their coach. Hopefully they can, so that's kind of the focus of the fans now, because they're ardent fans and they don't care whether it's AFL or NAL or whatever it is. They love their Predators. And so I just say, keep the faith.
Well, I have greatly appreciated our time tonight, Eric. I mean, you're able to give some insight into, a lot that fans are not privy to. And again, I want to thank you for reaching out to me, because, again, I know a lot of players within the Arena Football League family, but there are a lot of people that I don't know. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate that you reached out to me. And we thank you for being a part of the Arena Football family.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's good talking with you, and hopefully it wasn't too boring, because it's not talking about on the field stuff; it's behind the scenes stuff. But I greatly appreciate what you and Adam and other people have done over the years. With the website. That was kind of, the website was coming on as I was easing out of the league, but so that was my prime source of information since the late 90s on what was going on in the Arena League. And so you're to be commended for all that work and keeping everybody together all these years.
We want to thank Eric for joining us on the podcast. As you can see, if you've been listening to our entire series of podcasts, there are a lot of similarities when it comes to how a team actually starts. I mean, sometimes there's just a little bit of a tweak here and there, depending on where the team was actually started up and what city, and how many, I guess, were in the actual ownership group itself. But it was our pleasure to talk with them and to find out how the very famous Orlando Predators got started. Before we let you go, I do want to at least mention something that we have learned, and we want to at least promote it. If you do not know already, that there is a YouTube channel out there that is called it's called Arena Football TV. And we have learned that a game, one of the most historical and important games in league history, will be made available to the fans. And I've been told that a watch party will be taking place. It is for the showcase game that occurred. This is right before the league itself actually started. And stay tuned to social media as it will as the time will be announced very shortly. But I can tell you that the game is currently scheduled to be released on Black Friday this year. So right after Thanksgiving, you will be able to have there will be football that day, other than the NFL type and college. There will be football that for a game that has not been seen, I'm sure by a lot of us, in 30 plus years. So stay tuned to social media for more information. If you happen to miss any of the recent episodes, or if you want to go back to and listen to the entire series of historical podcasts for AFL Tonight, you can do so by heading over to SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and our audio version is also over on YouTube. If you have any suggestions for the show, there are a couple ways where you can get in contact with us. You can email us over at aflrewind@arenafan.com, or you can also find us on social media, whether it be the Arena Fan Facebook page or our Twitter accounts, and that could be at ArenaFan or at AFL Rewind. So we hope everybody stays safe, stays healthy, do what's necessary, especially in these very unique times. And we hope to have you back for the next episode. So everybody here at AFL Rewind, I'm Tim Capper. Watch the rebound off the net.